What is some messed up drama that happened in your high school? Genius dude who is now a Caltech prof was pestered mercilessly by a bunch of guys, and the leader was a spoiled kid with a Porsche 928. This was 1985. A rumor started that someone messed with this guy's car, and as days went by, it was clear that it was so bad the car was totaled, but not a lot of folks knew what happened. I was pretty good friends with this kid. Rob was always nice to him and his brain. Both parents worked at NASA JPL. Fascinated me. Turns out Rob had managed to break into the guy's car at night at his house with a Slim Jim and left something tucked under the driver's seat. It was a tightly sealed quart ball jar with a rat, 4 inches of hydrogen peroxide, and 3 inches of water. The chemical putrefied the rat into a horrific stank liquid, and it also intensified the aroma produced, as Rob said, by an order of magnitude. Rob said that anyone within 20 feet would retch uncontrollably, and the smell would persist for years. I think I'm the only one who knows why. A few days later, the jar exploded all over the car, and the smell was so bad that they had to junk the car for parts. Pretty sure the kid got another Porsche from daddy, but the fact that Rob destroyed an entire Porsche and humiliated the schmuck for less than $5 is still legendary in my mind. I kept the secret until almost 20 years later. Whoa, talk about a stink bomb of epic proportions. Rob is literally a genius, and it shows. Also a bit of a monster too, no? Story 2. This was back in Mississippi. I had an English teacher who absolutely hated me for no good reason. She kept lying to the staff to get me in trouble, suspending me or sending me to ISS, anything to get me out of her class. One day, I had enough and told her to her face, if she lied about me again to the staff, I'd do something about it. Later that day, I got into an argument with her and was kicked out of the class. On my way out, I had trouble putting my backpack on. I went to the office thinking nothing of it, only to get arrested. I spent 24 hours in a juvenile detention center. The charges were dropped by the case manager, and it never went on my record. She had apparently accused me of hurting her by elbowing her on the way out and said she was scared of me. Later at the parent-teacher conference, she was smug as a witch. None of the staff even bothered listening to me or my parents, or the ruling of the case manager. I spent the rest of the year at the alternative school. It was rather traumatic and really affected my decision to drop out of high school a few years later. Story 3. I was not involved, but when I was in 9th grade, our classmates were so rowdy and toxic that it caused the school to go into lockdown several times. One fight ended with one student pushing another student into the vending machine, broken glass everywhere. They took away the vending machine and drink machines from the hallways. We never got them back all through the 4 years. That year, they also brought in police and dogs. All the students had to stand against the walls as the dogs sniffed each person and each person's locker was sniffed. My class was crazy as well. One girl and guy were caught in the bathroom. The girl transferred to another school. At least 3 of the teachers, all female, were flirting with students throughout the 4 years. One teacher kissed a student on the cheek in front of us in class. 2 of them prepositioned a friend of mine, but he turned them down. He had a girlfriend. Story 4. Not nearly as bad, but there was a kid that used to always be such a schmuck to me. He graduated early and his dad bought him a brand new Camaro. This was in 2001. He came to visit everyone on the last day of school, being the schmuck he is. He parked it perpendicular to my car in the parking lot. There's a metal railing in front of my car, and he was parked a few feet behind me, blocking me in. I asked him to move his car, and he just walked off with his friends. I got out of the parking spot, and his brand new Camaro had a huge dent and scrape on his passenger side from my bumper when I backed out and left. My car was a 1985 Oldsmobile 98 Regency, a chrome bumper, so my car was just fine. I went home and told my grandpa what I did, and he was proud of me and said we will deal with it when the time comes. It never did. I heard nothing else on the matter. Story 5. A school sergeant, a kind of guard who also kept kids in line, was an ex-army grumpy person. He was always picking on kids about their uniforms, and his favorite line was, if you do or don't do XYZ, you'll get my size 10 up your back. He really laid it on thick, and he was definitely scary. However, I had the pleasure of seeing him break his tough facade a few times. When users were hanging around outside the front gate pestering the kids, he went ballistic at them and made sure we were all okay after they left. A couple of times on camping trips, he got super protective of us. During a bushfire near a campsite, he was there putting it out and checking on everyone. When a kid got bitten by a snake or a stick, and we were in a remote area where an ambulance would take forever, he put the kid in his ancient Land Cruiser and drove like a madman. One of the kids swore he was going more than double the speed limit at times. After I left school, one of the teachers was sleeping with someone and got arrested. I heard through the grapevine that the sergeant spent an hour with the kid while the cops handled things. Story 6. Not drama per se, but we had a kid drown during gym class. He He couldn't swim, so the teacher had him swim laps in the shallow end with a kickboard while the rest of the class played water polo. Fast forward, and halfway through the polo match, someone noticed the kid wasn't swimming laps next to us. A student got out of the pool and looked and saw him at the bottom of the deep end. The teacher dove down and pulled him up and started CPR, but it was too late. I'll never forget it. Very traumatizing for any person and such a heartbreak for the kid's family that lost him. Story 7. Supposedly, our principal was caught with a teacher at the school during school hours. His wife was also a teacher at the school, and his daughter was a student. When the county school board held a meeting to address the situation, the teacher he'd been sleeping with during the previous school year, still not his wife, got in a fight with the new mistress. That's just one of many stories. Our school was a cesspool of drama from the employees rather than the students. Well, I guess that's one way to keep the staff engaged. Story 8. One of the girls in the junior high a couple of years below me was taken away. The whole community turned out to help in the search of the woods behind the girl's house. Kids from our school could volunteer as well, so a lot did just that. One of the people who was helping in the search was her next-door neighbor, and as it turns out, the criminal. Pretty chilling to think a bunch of kids were side by side with the man who had terminated one of us. Story 9. I was approached by the school's gymnastics coach asking me to join the team after I successfully held that cross pose on the rings during a fitness evaluation. I decided to check it out because there were a number of cute girls on the team. I showed up at the practice and there was only one other male. Right off the bat, I picked up on this very weird vibe between the coach and all the females on the team. It was like they worshipped him and they were his property. I never went back. Senior year, the scandal broke when he impregnated one of the team members. Turns out he was with all of them, usually at the same time. I missed out. Story 10. My favorite was this notorious for being a piece of crap guy who broke up with his girlfriend. She found out he was cheating on her, so she wanted to fight him. After school, everyone is telling the guy not to fight her for obvious reasons, but he agrees. She kicks the crap out of this guy, and he manages to break free and run away into the back seat of his mom's car. That's right, he called his mom to back him up. She starts talking crap to all of us high school kids from her car while he cries in the back seat. Super weird. Later that year, I guess, in an attempt to get some street cred back, he agrees to a getaway driver with his mom's car for a crime. I can't remember who did it, but the victim's brother was there and jumped on the front of the car and started trying to punch through the windshield as they drove off. Both of the kids in the car got arrested the same day and the victim recovered. Ended up working with the brother later. Super cool dude. Story 11. When I was in high school, a PE teacher had some recently graduated former students over for a pool party. He was fired for about a year and a half before returning to teaching. When my mom was in high school, she screamed at a teacher and he passed away. Her science teacher was a complete creep. He would look down and purposely put his arms around their waist to get by them in class. One day, my mom had enough and put her hand over her so he couldn't ogle her. He yelled at her to get out of his class for being disrespectful. One of my mom's guy's friends in the class told him that she just didn't want to be ogled by an old man and he was kicked out of the class. On her way out the door, my mom told him, "I hope you fall down and break your neck, you sleazy piece of crap." 2 weeks later, he fell down the rugby/outdoor track stairs at the school, broke his neck, and passed away. Story 12. One of my favorite sped teachers had a very bad year when I was a junior. She'd gotten pregnant and her fiancé broke up with her. Then the school laid her off. I don't have the full story, but she was tough in a way that made us kids like and respect her. I'm pretty convinced nothing that happened to her was her fault. Then, a year or two after I graduated, a sped teacher the school hired got caught smoking with a student behind the abandoned Chinese buffet. Also, a friend of mine from a lower grade used to be friends with a relative of the middle school's principal. Used to is key. The guy apparently went full MAGA over a half-decade before MAGA was a thing. It culminated with a school threat and the police finding weapons and flags in their vehicle. My friend had parted ways as much as was possible in a school of under 400 kids long ago by this point, but still heard about it. Apart from all that, it was a pretty chill place. Story 13. An art student, Jill, dated a fellow art student, Jack, for a couple of months. Sometime after they split, one of their mutual friends borrowed Jack's laptop for a project and found a hidden camera tape of Jack and Jill. The friend told Jill, who immediately took legal action against Jack. During the proceedings, it emerged that Jack had used the video footage as a reference to create a life-size sample of Jill, which he had recently submitted for a class project, without her knowledge or permission, of course. The next day, Jack returned to class, and the art teacher, having been informed of the discoveries by Jill, proceeded to ream him out. This devout Baptist teacher called him every variant you could possibly imagine, and basically renounced him as a student. Jack, who loved this teacher like a mother, was so upset and ashamed that he left school and refused to return. This in turn created some prime-time family drama for Jack, as his still living grandparents had bequeathed him an inheritance of hundreds of thousands of dollars on the sole condition that he had to graduate from that specific high school, a private Baptist school. Story 14. Around the end of a school year, either my fourth or fifth grade year, and for most of the following summer, the kids' bicycles were being stolen around town. Being a small community, everyone was on high alert and fingers were being pointed in all directions. The local police began making people keep their bikes locked up or inside, which didn't take much persuasion, as bike owners and especially parents were already stressed about the situation. The fact that someone could keep stealing several bikes each week in a very small and tight-knit community of 1,200 residents without being caught had people concerned about what else might be going on unnoticed. When we all returned to class the next school year, we were introduced to our new superintendent. It turned out that the man who had until the previous year served as our superintendent was in fact the individual responsible for these bike thefts. Dude had been selling them for parts, and I think he had a son or other close male relative who used parts for his business. But not much, if anything, was returned to those who had been robbed, most of those people being children at the time. Apparently, it was actually the son of the superintendent who stole the bikes, and the superintendent was temporarily replaced during the investigation and was shunned by some in the community once he did return to his role as superintendent, while others praised his return. Story 15. A girl tried to burn down the theater in my tech theater class, and we're having a clean the theater and reset everything day. I'm working on a light and I smell something burning. One of the vacuums is pretty old, so I figured it was that when someone else smelled it and said it wasn't coming from the vacuum. Then I noticed the smoke. I tracked it to one of the dressing rooms and saw how much smoke was coming out. I touched the door, wasn't hot, and gently touched the handle, slightly warm but pretty close to room temperature. I opened the door to find a stack of old costumes on fire and spreading. I yelled, "Fire!" Got chastised later for yelling that and not pulling a fire alarm, and everyone ran for it while the teacher grabbed a fire extinguisher. Later, when heads were counted, a few students couldn't be accounted for. One of them had an attack of conscience and said that it was this one girl. When confronted, she didn't even deny it. She admitted to it and said it was because she was angry at the teacher for having written her up for something. I don't remember what. She was pretty open about how miserable she was in school and as a person. Scary thing was, directly over the dressing room was storage for the rest of the costumes. Had the fire gotten up there, that would have been it for the building. A few years later, a different theater teacher was found out to have been threatening students by saying how he could make their scholarships go away. Small town with not many ways out. They investigated, but since he was so close to retirement, they basically just kicked him out of school. He was still walking around free. Wow, she really took burning the candle at both ends to a whole new level, huh? Story 16. I'm a teacher, and this was from like the third year of my career. One of the paras in our school was busted for substances sales in a major way, like $90,000 in cash, and a metric ton of substances and weapons at his house. He was apparently pretty high up on the chain. I think he was sentenced to 10 years and was among 25 total people arrested. But he was the nicest, nerdiest dude ever. Super happy and friendly, but looking back, I guess that was the oxy. It's always the ones you would never suspect. Oh, and I remember another one. A teacher I worked with was taking money for grades, $1 a point, slip her 100, you would get an A for the marking period. She had been doing it for long enough that she bought herself a car. She was charged and got 18 months probation and lost her teaching license. Story 17. We had an undercover cop in our school. She was in my second period class. Real quiet, and I never suspected anything. I think she was like 25 and 26 and blended in with a bunch of 14 to 15-year-olds. The kid who sat behind me was a typical user. One day we get to class and the principal comes on the loudspeaker. He mentions that we've had an undercover cop and they arrested 5 people. The kid who sat behind me was gone that day, but I didn't think anything of it. Later, I came to find out that he basically offered the undercover cop all kinds of substances. He planned to skip school that day and was tipped off by another student when the announcement was made. Cops had to chase him down and find him. The other 4 students were just in trouble for grass, but this kid gave her everything. She was going around to parties and asking everyone for substances. Story 18. A girl in my sister's class was with our band teacher. He was a band teacher for middle and high school. Parents already felt iffy about the dude. He was in his mid-20s and would have given students rides home from late marching band practice or gigs, and then somehow saw him dropping the girl off at school in the morning. And then my sister happened to drive by his house and saw her car parked out front in the middle of the night. He basically had to skip town after being confronted. She graduated and they got married, moved half a country away, to my knowledge, still together. I had a different teacher, middle school drama teacher, got popped for his crimes. Makes a lot more sense when I think back to a traumatic memory I had from his class where I was acting something out on the little classroom stage, And unbeknownst to me, he just sat back and laughed. I didn't even realize what happened until I went back to my seat and a girl at my table told me. Story 19. A kid passed away on the football field. Everyone was mourning. One kid called out the fact that the kid that passed away had been jumping kids, taking video of it and posting online, and that he deserved it. Walked out of the auditorium. The whole room was silent, but you could hear every kid's internal thoughts agree with him. One kid left, then more and more. The teachers tried to stop it. But that one kid who was brave enough to speak up, eventually they just ended the whole thing. It was the best thing ever. The school threatened to punish the kid, but the parents packed him up and asked if it was true that the kid did in fact jump one student that ended up having a seizure and being hospitalized. Story 20. We had this teacher. If I had a guess, I'd put her in her mid to late 30s at the time, but I'd never been good with ages. Anyway, she was very much a type, kind of like a grown-up punk rock aesthetic, tattoos, dyed hair, reddish brown hair, dark makeup, basically as alternative as she could get away with while still complying with general standards of professionalism, very snarky and sarcastic. She also had a flock of women. My school, for whatever reason, had quite a few girls that were more into girls, at least they were at the time. The majority of them ended up with guys in the long run. They were mostly all pretty alternative too, and they flocked around this teacher from the moment they started school. The older ones would bring the new ones in. It was, frankly, creepy. Many of these girls never even had her as a teacher. She would even invite them to her house regularly. But there was no drama around her. Of course not. Women can't commit crimes. No, the drama came when a guy a year under me danced with her at some school dance. She was very loose and friendly with basically all the students, though not to the extent she was with the girls, and her dancing with students was not an unheard of thing. But when this dude danced with her, he tried to pick her up. I wasn't there, so I don't know too many details, but basically he tried to pick her up, like as part of the dance. She did not want to be picked up, struggled, and he ended up dropping her. Miss had the gall to press charges against this kid, I forget which. There was very clearly nothing intimate intended in what he did. The kid was a well-known, harmless goofball, an annoying one, but still. But that didn't matter. He ended up being suspended for a while, and I graduated before the issue was resolved, so I'm not sure what happened. I graduated in '09. 2 years ago, I learned that the teacher was finally fired for her inappropriate behavior, and that she's also now married to a girl that was a year under me. I do not know if these two are related. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure she waited several years after the student graduated before they got married. And if you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 21. In junior high, the fire alarm went off on a Thursday. Whatever, you don't think much of it and just proceed like it's a drill. Then we get outside and the fire trucks show up. Turns out there was a fire. Wow. Okay, gets taken care of. We go back inside eventually. Next day, fire alarm again. We're walking outside. Speculation is maybe we were too slow yesterday, so now it is a drill. Fire trucks again. God dang, 2 fires in a row now. Something is really weird. Again, it gets taken care of. If it isn't too big, we go back to class. By the way, there's a giant propane tank right outside the school for whatever reason. I remember seeing it from across the field thinking, boy, that's not in the best spot. All right, Monday rolls around and we're in first period. Frickin' fire alarm. What the hell? My class was on the second floor midway down the hall. We get out to the muster point across the field. We're all standing there just waiting to get let back in. Boom, a window breaks and flames start spewing out the second floor at the end of the hall. Holy crap. Now, this is a legit fire. Our school was literally 100 meters away from a fire department. It took them like 30 minutes to get there. They must have been out on a call or something, but it seemed to take forever. As with many buildings here locally, it was built of wood, so the place charred up pretty well. They put it out, but we all got sent home. I forget how many days off they gave us, but the engineers had to determine if the school was safe to be in. I don't recall there being any grief counseling available or anything, but who knows? I'm sure these days there would have been. This was 2001. Turns out a teacher set all the fires. She was a science teacher, so she had access to flammable liquids and such. Apparently she was bipolar or something and stopped taking her meds. Amazingly, no one got hurt. Story 22. My school had many major dramas throughout the whole time I was in high school. It'll be easier to list them off. One teacher had a triad with 2 students and she was promptly fired. One student harmed another with a gas mask. The parents of the kid who did it were the head of police in the area, so a lot of hush money was given over to the victim. Uniforms were so strict that we weren't allowed to take off our blazers in the hot summer heat, and people caught without them were sent to detention. They also sent you to detention if you weren't wearing a clip-on tie, even if you wore a real tie the exact same color. The school's management were so incompetent that they put the year 7s, 12-year-olds, alone in the same building as the year 11s, 16-year-olds, so that the year 11s would look out for them. Rampant pestering ensued. We went through 4 head teachers in 6 years. One of them disappeared for around 6 months before popping back up as a head teacher in a different part of the country. The Academy Trust was siphoning money from my school to a different school as they had deemed my school as a lost cause, despite actually improving. There was a huge network hack that resulted in the entire system being encrypted, meaning no access to school computers and everyone's coursework being turned into bloatware. Due to the siphoning of money, they never rebuilt the network and forced us to use Google Docs at the 11th hour. Story 23. Kid in the grade above me got cancer, something not too serious but went from a nobody to being very popular. Everyone knew him and was rooting for him. He was on the news, close with the police department, etc. His senior year, he was 18. He was so popular with the freshman girls, if you know what I mean. I just have to add this kid was not attractive in any means. He just really played up the cancer card. Pretty sure he was declared cancer-free around 16, but always kept his head freshly shaved bald. Anyways, turns out he was texting a ton of freshmen, which is terrible and disgusting in and of itself. Compared to the other crap he did, this was nothing. So the king himself was so proud, delusional, weird that he has a group chat with a bunch of these girls all sending pics and videos back and forth. I don't know why or how they were comfortable all sending this stuff to him in a collective group chat. Maybe they felt safe together? I don't know. Completely besides the point. I don't know how this particular event happened, but one day he sends a video of himself to the chat, and the girls pass it around to everyone at school. Somehow, I ended up seeing this video. It's still out there. I could probably dig it up, but then I would have to scrub my eyes with bleach all over again. God, I have Tourette's just remembering it. Thankfully, it got spread around enough that the cops got word of it and shut most of it down. But he didn't do any jail time, just no access to electronics and can't be left alone with minors without supervision for a few years. Like I said, cancer card got him buddy-buddy with law enforcement. I haven't really heard anything about him since, but I'm sure he's still around town as ugly and as disgusting as ever. I'm going to go reread the news articles and see what I dig up. Story 24. A new young male teacher was accused of sleeping with the captain of the Kamoji team, but no names were mentioned. 2 young male teachers joined the year the rumor started. One was handsome as hell, and the other had a face that looked like the sole of a foot, but played hurling for county. The Kamoji captain wasn't talking, so the handsome guy got fired. 2 years later, she graduated school and married the one with a face like a foot. The geography teacher and the home ec teacher were married, but he got off with my sister one night, several years after she left school. And Mr. Nevin and Hottie Hotface, I can't remember her name, but she was lovely, broke up. My sister's name was dirt in the town for years after. Our school priest left to go to a mafia-run place in Italy and got terminated because he was able to reach so many of the kids the mafia were using for their deals. God rest Father Boylan, you were one of the good ones. Story 25. This teacher had been known to be creepy. I met him the summer before 8th grade. He was a volunteer tutor, and he looked me up and down and asked if I played soccer and that I should play for his school's team. When I started high school, everyone talked about how he was a creep and overall super aggressive. My boyfriend said he wrapped his hands around my boyfriends when he was a sophomore. Well, now that I'm a senior, he was finally fired because he told a sophomore in his class he could kiss her. He's been known to be a creep since I was in 6th grade and was finally fired now that I'm in 12th. The dramatic part is that all the teachers knew because we never kept it a secret that he was a creep, but no teacher reported him or even tried to understand why we thought he was creepy. Story 26. I've got a few, including some at nearby schools. The first is the classic creepy teacher. There was an attractive teacher who taught casually at a few different schools in my area. She was usually brought in to replace English teachers. Long story short, she got caught with a student at the sports-based high school about 20 minutes south of my high school. The second is the classic teen pregnancy. The student was relatively new to our high school when I started hearing rumors about her being pregnant. I never saw any pictures and I'm not sure whether it was true or not, but I hope she's doing well. Lastly, the other I remember is that a girl cheated on her boyfriend at one of the other local schools, and he shared her photos around because of it. She went on to cheat again, but I still think he went too far. There are probably more, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. I've also heard rumors about my music teacher being a criminal since I've graduated, but I have no idea whether the person who told me had all the details right. Story 27. My high school football team was going for state, so when the star player failed math, he accused the teacher of mistreatment. He claimed he had been coerced by the teacher, who supposedly had photos he'd taken of him in the locker room. He claimed he was given a failing grade for not putting out. The teacher had his name dragged through the mud, and the student who accused him went on to win state with the team like he wanted. It wasn't until months later when the other players from the team came forward with the truth, stating that he had bragged to them about making it up because he couldn't accept that he lost eligibility to play. After being interviewed and confronted with their statements, he admitted he made it all up and all the charges were dropped. Just a really crappy situation all around. Story 28. Oh, holy moly, so many things, but this one's my favorite. Not messed up, just funny and uber cringe. Don't ask how exactly, but basically, my high school had an elective that was independent radio. Think very local, online, and shortwave. We had a soundboard, etc. It was cool. I think something like up to 150,000 people could technically be reached. Anyways, there was a homecoming football game and we'd won. One of the players from our team called his girlfriend, who was not only doing a radio show at the moment, but had been covering the game as it happened. Long story short, she proceeded to tell him all sorts of very explicit things. She wanted him as a congratulations that night at her parents' house. Rule number 1 of radio is when you call in from your car, turn your own radio off for audio feedback purposes. Rule number 2 is when you're running the radio show, turn off your mic when you play music or on air and don't want to talk. The girl failed to do that and basically broadcast live her advances. She was a senior, so she didn't leave school or anything, but for the rest of the year, she kept a very low profile. Needless to say, the recording of that show was removed from online, but the damage was done. Story 29. For my school, I wasn't there, but after the details got leaked to other people and spread around the school, a girl started being called 3-Hole Harper. Shortly after, in an attempt to redeem herself, she pulled a prank thinking people would find it funny, but we were all mostly mortified. We lived in the same town where Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka terminated some girls, including Carla's sister Tammy. Apparently, this girl found Carla's parents' phone number, called them, and asked if Tammy was home. It was awful. For my husband's school, he worked there at this time. He went to an all-boys school, and one of the female teachers got caught not wearing garments. Or rather, she got upset when she found out that all the boys were finding ways to take pictures. She complained to the administration, who were like, "What the hell?" and fired her. Story 30. I have no way to confirm this, but the show, American Vandals, about who drew the stuff, was very closely related to something that happened at our school, which was the same area that the show took place in. One night back in 2004, when I was in high school, somebody had gotten onto the campus and roamed around the halls, spray painting various sizes onto all of the surfaces. There was a 20-foot one in the gym, so it looks like it might have been multiple people. It wasn't a whole lot of security or cameras and stuff like that, especially back then at my school. When we got to school the next day, which I think was in the middle of the week because we had school the day prior, all of the surfaces were covered with tarps and cloth, so almost none of the students actually saw what happened. I'm honestly not sure why, but I was one of the first people called into the office to be asked about it. I think it was because I had used chalk to decorate my locker, thinking that it wouldn't be an issue because it was easily wiped off, and I just put a bunch of flames and hearts and stuff like that. They brought me in, and I had no idea why because, as I mentioned, nobody had seen the stuff, so no one was aware that there was anything going on. Kind of just looked like construction was happening. And they didn't come out right saying what happened. They just asked me what I was doing last night, what my friends were doing, etc. And I was real nervous because I thought maybe somebody got hurt or a real serious matter was going down because I've never been taken and questioned at the principal's office. I was one of those real quiet goody-goody kids. It turned out that all the students had been questioned, and for the real serious offenders, if they thought they might really be associated with what happened, they actually had their parents and police there for it. Everybody else just got a casual question, so I felt better about that. Everything was covered up really quickly. Almost nobody knew what happened. Everything was painted over. Nobody was really talking about it because nobody knew what happened. But we were all buzzing that week about being questioned and what was going on, and all kinds of rumors were floating around. We had a lot of other real serious drama in the past and pretty soon into the future from this point, but for some reason that one was the biggest drama at our school. Even though a lot of people had no idea what had actually even happened, the rumors were insane. And once word actually did start to get out of what happened, all kinds of crappy kids were trying to take credit for drawing them just for clout. To this day, I don't think anybody knows who really drew them, and as far as most people know, nobody got specific blame or outed for doing it by the school, if anybody ever was caught. It was handled really quietly and privately. But that was the same year that there were warnings and codes of conduct put out for senior pranks. Story 31. After I left, an English teacher who was running a play tailored one of the boys. He was legal, but because she held a position of power over him, still went to jail. In the boy's testimony, he described it as feeling like he didn't have a choice. Real shame, I had her husband for a lot of classes, and he was really nice. A boy getting actually expelled. This was a posh private school. The boys and their parents would be encouraged to seek education elsewhere, often done with the dumb kids. Well, this boy had a history. In year 8, when we were camping, he whizzed on an older boy's half shelter while he was asleep in it. He was known for general misbehavior and a bit of pestering. He would sometimes get spiked and come to class, but the real kicker was a serious bit of vandalism. He and his mates kept milk cartons, tomato sauce, all sorts of perishable liquids in the playground for like 2 months. This was in the Australian summer heat. Well, one day they grabbed it all and sprayed it all over one of the bathrooms, clogged the toilets. I think one of them smeared it on the wall. They had to bring in outside cleaners because ours refused to do it. The stench was so bad. It was the final straw, and the other boys named him as the one who came up with it and encouraged it. Story 32. Oh, so much happened. Here's a few stories. A kid I knew was super involved in the dark web. We would buy and sell weapons, and one day he invited people over for a barbecue and fed them burgers. After they ate them, he told them he pranked them because he had ordered a strange meat. Maybe he's full of crap, but knowing him, I would not put it past him at all. A mom from our neighboring high school got arrested by our local FBI because she was inviting her daughter's classmates over to her huge mansion and selling them all sorts of stuff. She would let her daughter throw parties all the time and was secretly selling the kids there her whole medicine cabinet. Her daughter had no clue her mom was doing all this crap up until her arrest. My sophomore year history teacher got arrested because this girl had all these texts and more evidence that he was selling her grass and trying to hook up with her. 2 years later, the girl confessed that she made the texts up with some other dude because said teacher gave her a bad grade. My first year video film teacher got arrested from a sting operation for being involved in a ring. All the students that were in his class made all these meme edits of his mugshot and put the video film lessons to work. Story 33. We've had a science teacher get caught up with a sophomore. This was the year before lockdown in my state. She's doing well now, studying to be a nurse. We had an 8th grade history teacher get arrested for mistreatment. A 7th grade art teacher and her high school English teacher husband were arrested for trying to steal from a come and go. Definitely just revealed my region of the U.S. The high school has 3 principals assigned to students by alphabet. One was arrested for a DUI last year. We had a kid and a group of his friends threatening the school. There were kids being pulled out of class, pictures of firearms present in the parking lot, and warnings on social media of when they were going to do it. Our school lied to the media and concerned parents because they were upset by the attendance. Back in the day, we had a murder. A girl had rejected an ex-boyfriend, and she was terminated, and then he turned the weapon on himself in front of a classroom during school hours. I had a friend that was suspended in 8th grade for selling prescription pills on school grounds. Before he left for his final day in suspension, he in the trash can. Story 34. Not in high school, but in middle school, 4 and 1. Get ready for this mega thread. The first one was a guy who had some beef with one of the witchy girls, not like the plastic from Mean Girls, but just an ugly potato. So, and I don't know how, but he hacked into her school Google account and pasted, I think, anti-Semitism in a school group chat. Might have been her Snapchat account, don't remember. The next one was 3 students who had created a Google chat room where they just spread answers and cheated on lessons and tests as they were the only ones in there. They spouted crap talk about other people in the class, and I think one of the guys, who was a girl who claimed she was Jewish, said something anti-Semitic. The school found out, and they had their Chromebooks confiscated. Another drama was that a guy, just a quite nice fella, was pestered by his buddies just because he didn't want to play the game they were. Like, what? And all his friends began pestering him just because they were afraid of, I guess, their leader. Just absolutely awful. How petty do you have to pester a guy and intimidate your friends because they didn't want to play Fortnite? Finally, one of the little guys, short guy, had some beef with one of the troublemaker kids, and so he wanted to fight him in the schoolyard. But the troublemaker took his friends to the fight and they roughened him up. He got really angry and it was a large drama. A girl was ignored by her friends one morning, and my conspiracy theory is that the boss of the witch hierarchy didn't like her, and so she had her friends pester her. Again, awful people. The girl who was the boss of the witch clique is the same who said that anti-Semitic stuff in the Google chat. Story 35. There was this one girl I was kind of friends with in high school who thought she was God's gift or something. Still does from what I see on social media, but she was convinced all the guys had a crush on her. Spoiler, they didn't. She wasn't super unattractive or anything, but the guys could tell she was just fake and attention-seeking, so kept their distance. One day, she decided it would be a great idea to send photos to this dude who was in an established relationship with one of the popular girls. This girlfriend was very athletic, quite broadly built for a woman, and very strong. The guy obviously showed his GF the photos immediately, and the GF blew up. Threatened to roughen up this girl, and it became a huge deal. The girl was pretty short and not athletic, so she would have had the crap kicked out of her. The girl ended up moving schools because of it. I found out a few months later that she told everyone it was because her parents said she'd get a better education at a different school. Only me and a handful of other people knew the truth. I only found this out when our math teacher asked in a class that had the guy and girlfriend in too, what happened to the girl in question. Someone said the better school story, and I just burst out laughing. I don't think she ever learned her lesson. And if you like these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.